Today we're looking at Acts chapter 20. I know it's been a while, but I'm going to be continuing on a common theme that I've had throughout the book of Acts. That theme is reality. The things that take place in Acts aren't wild, off-the-wall kind of stories. It's not like a Hercules story where you look at that and go, yeah, right. It's not a myth. You hear about real people, real responses. Even when the miraculous occurs, the response that occurs along with it is what you'd expect given where the people are at when it's occurring. So let's go ahead and start with verse 1 of chapter 20. After the uproar had ceased, Paul called the disciples to himself, embraced them, and departed to go to Macedonia. Picking up from where we left off, there's just been a big uproar. He has just, by teaching the truth, upset the local merchants who are afraid that their gods that they make with their hands from gold and silver and jewels or even wood are not going to have the value they used to have. Because if I can make the god out of a stick, what kind of god is it? They felt threatened. And because they felt threatened, they caused an uproar. This is just after that uproar has been calmed down. That's why Paul is going and encouraging those of the faith, because of what they've seen and what they may be able to expect to see more of in the future. Continuing on, verse 3. I should do verse 2. I missed a verse. Now when he'd gone over that region and encouraged them with many words, he came to Greece and stayed 3 months. And when the Jews plotted against him as he was about to sail to Syria, he decided to return through Macedonia. And Sopater of Berea accompanied him to Asia. And Aristarchus and Secundus of the Thessalonians, and Gaius of Derbe, and Timothy, and Tychicus, and Trophimus of Asia. These men going ahead waited for us at Troas, but we sailed away from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread, and in 5 days joined them at Troas, where they stayed 7 days. There's been problems. There's been problems, and they're a bit fearful of taking the obvious route. So instead of taking the obvious route and inviting the problem, they changed their plans. That's reasonable. Recognizing that people can continue to be nasty, what do we read about? The Jews were plotting against them. It didn't say the Jews were ready to reason against them, that the Jews were ready to offer up the argument that showed the error that Paul was teaching. No, they were plotting against them. It's like today, unfortunately. Too often, emotion is what drives people's decisions. It's not based in logic. It's not based in reasoning. It's not based in an understanding that's been worked out. How you feel is reason enough to act. That's what we see here. The exact same kind of behavior that we can see today. Continuing on, verse 7. Now on the first day of the week, when the disciples came together to break bread, Paul, ready to depart the next day, spoke to them and continued his message until midnight. There were many lamps in the upper room where they were gathering together, and in a window sat a certain young man named Eutychus, who was sinking into a deep sleep. He was overcome by sleep, and as Paul continued speaking, he fell down from the 3rd story and was taken up dead. But Paul went down, fell on him, and embracing him said, "Do not trouble yourselves, for his life is in him." Now when he had come up, had broken bread and eaten, and talked a long while, even till daybreak, he departed. And they brought the young man in alive, and they were not a little comforted. Think about that situation. 3rd story, that's not really close to the ground. Falls, dies. If he had died and stayed dead, do you think that that meeting is going to continue? I think if he dies and is dead, I think the meeting is over. That's it. The price was too high. People are not going to be happy with where they're at. That he did not die, was raised from the dead, and people realized he's not dead. That gave additional authority to what Paul was saying. Not because Paul did it, but because God did it. God is the one that provides the power. God is the one who makes the difference. And just like when Jesus was there, God gave witness to the truth of what Jesus was teaching. God was giving witness to the truth of what Paul was teaching. And because of God's witness, people weren't able to just continue listening. They listened till daybreak. And they were thankful that the young man was still alive and with them. I think the same kind of thing would be true today. If people were believers and they heard teaching with power and authority, and then they saw the power, they're going to want to hear as much as they can. And they knew Paul was going on. Acts is an awesome book because it contains so much human action reality, where if you read it and you think about it, you can relate it to today in many, many ways. Whether it be the jealousy we saw from chapter 19, the unreasoned response of plotting in chapter 20, the thankfulness and the recognition of the power that was displayed. Those are all things that if you take the time to think about it, it rings true. Paul's the one that will tell those in Corinth, you have tested the word and proven to yourself that it is true. And because you've tried it and know that the teachings are sound, you can believe Christ came and died even though you never saw it. We can try God's word, put it to the test, live by the example of Christ, by the teachings we find in the letters. The life you'll have will be a lot better. And in many simple ways, we already know it without having to even try it. But when you try it and you find it to be the good that the word declares it to be, it's a whole lot easier to have faith. Why? Because it's proven to be true. Faith is the evidence. Think about that. That one quote doesn't start out, faith is a blind. No, it's not blind. Faith is based in evidence. Not like you're going to find in a court of law, but because you have tried, you have tested, you can believe. God didn't say, throw it all away, do whatever I say, because I think it sounds good and there's no reasoning to it. From in the beginning, we see people choosing for themselves. Guess what? They do that today way too often. Throughout the whole Old Testament, we see people making regular kind of people choices when they choose for themselves and choose to ignore God's guidance, which they know to be in their best interest. It may be in my best interest to eat vegetables, but I don't really care for most of the green stuff until my daughter learned how to cook it real well. Just because something is good for you doesn't mean you like it. I don't like exercising a ton, but it's still good for me and I need to be doing it to stay healthy. God's word is a guidance that goes against what the world puts forth as good. But the truth is, this kind of good endures. It's good in this life. It's good for eternity. Pray you keep in God's word daily. I'm also praying you're keeping healthy.